Hey, Sing fam, it's time for another Coffee with Ken session, and today we're going to be chatting about 7 practice habits of highly effective singers. So, we'll get to it right after this. Today we're here to chat about 7 practice habits of highly effective singers. So, let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to use my cheat sheet. Practice tip number 1, schedule it. Okay? Schedule your practice sessions. Now, this is one of those tips that most of you are going to glaze right over. Just be like, okay, yeah, got it, go on. No, 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 no. If you're serious about getting progress, if you're serious about taking your voice to the next level, then you've got to schedule your practice, right? You've got to schedule it because if you don't schedule it, it makes it too easy for life to get in the way and it not to happen. But if you schedule it and you prioritize it and you make sure that you're actually doing it, you're going to continue to take more and more steps forward. You're going to have a lot more ability to progress. So do yourself a favor, schedule your practices. If you don't sacrifice for your goal becomes the sacrifice. So keep that in mind, schedule your practices. Tip number 2, you want to have a plan. Okay, so really effective people don't just kind of halfway practice. Don't be going into your practice being like, oh, I think I'll just sing through maybe this song and maybe play with this, and then fast forward 20 minutes and you sang through however many songs on your playlist, and you haven't really thought about anything. Well, when you do that, or even when you just sing through a song mindlessly, all you're doing is reestablishing old habit. So you're not improving, you're just continuing to keep that same momentum, right? So have a plan. Know what it is you want to do. Now, if you want to work on a whole song, if you want to get the lyrics down for a song or something like that, learn a new song, do that. If your goal is to get better at something technically, practice that. If your goal is to get better at something stylistically, practice that. But know what your focus is going to be so that you know how to really move forward in your practice session and what to focus on. Otherwise, without that focus, your attention's only going to be so potent, if that makes sense. Tip number 3, know when to use short bursts of practice versus singing through like a whole song. So if you're looking to learn a song, then you need to get some momentum and kind of figuring out how the lyrics go, follow each other and everything. So you need that momentum. You need to practice in bigger chunks. But if you're working on how to establish like a certain vocal technique or style into a song, break it down. Break it down and get repetition, because we can only develop habit through repetition. That's really the whole purpose of practice in the first place, is to develop good vocal habits so that when we go to sing, in a performance or whatever, then you're not having to think about it. But you can only do that with a lot of repetition of right action. And so the best way to do that, and it's kind of almost like a cheat code, is practice like a line, 2 lines, maybe a verse at a time, max. Focus on getting the lyrics right. Focus on doing whatever technically you need to do, maybe staying free of tension. Focus on those things. And then that'll give you the ability to do that over and over. And if you get something wrong, you can go right back to it and practice it again. If you get it wrong, go right back to it, practice it again. And those shorter bursts of practice give you the ability to focus more intensely. So you definitely want to do that. And then tip number 4 is, if you're going to when you're practicing obviously live, you want to listen and adjust. So don't just go through singing it mindlessly. I know I've said this a million times by now, but don't sing through a song mindlessly and go on autopilot and find yourself at the end of the song and be like, oh, yeah, that went pretty good. Let's do it again. Know what it is, pay attention to what's happening and adjust accordingly. So if you know what your focus is, let's say you want to focus on style, if you notice something kind of goes out, adjust that. If you notice you want to focus on, say, technique, and you want to have that focus on steady, consistent flow of air, whatever, like you can pay attention. If you notice that airflow kind of wanes at a certain part, starts to get faulty, you can go back to that part and repeat it. Right, so keep that focus when you're practicing, when you're singing through those phrases. And if you find it hard to both execute and to kind of like observe it at the same time, then you need to record it, right? You need to record those short bursts of practice, listen to it, observe, see what worked, see what didn't, and then readjust, and then do it again. Right? And you can do that over and over and over. Okay, so that's tip number 4. Tip number 5 is you want to avoid being rigid, and when you make adjustments, just nudge. So it's really easy if you become over analytical. Now I sound like I'm kind of contradicting myself, but it's easy if you become over analytical in your practice for things to get very rigid and locked down. So you kind of have to balance that line of guiding yourself, but not forcing things in a certain direction. Because you really can't accomplish anything when you become rigid as a singer. So observe yourself, recognize if there's any rigidity, give yourself a moment, relax, reset, start again. So you want to be aware of that. Tip number, oh gosh, we're on 6. So, okay, so all of that said, but don't quit. If things don't work out the first time or 2 or 10 or 20, keep playing with it. Keep guiding your voice in a certain way. If you have a plan, you know what that plan is. It's like, okay, well, I want to make sure that I want to work on getting more resonance or being more free of tension, right? If you notice at a certain part things don't work, well, that's because you have years of habit of doing that in a certain way. You know, maybe not that song, but that whatever it is you're executing. So you've got to kind of get used to guiding and playing with getting in the right direction. Will you get all the way there? Like, for example, one of the things that I hear people say a lot of times when they come back from lessons, you know, I'll be like, how'd your practicing go? They're like, oh, I didn't practice because I wasn't really sure. I couldn't get back to where we were in our lesson. And I'm like, yeah, I know, because that's what usually happens. Like, here's where you were, here's where you got into it in a lesson. And if you even get to here, that's great, because we've let go of all of this other stuff. And you've created another reference point. And that's another thing that practice does. It gives you the ability to create more reference points. So while you may not be able to accomplish 100% of what you want to do, maybe you kind of repeatedly do something and it doesn't quite go where you want it to go, but you kind of just keep moving it in the right direction, then that's a good practice. You know, it's not the most exciting practice, but it's a good practice. Now, all of that said, you also want to keep in mind that you need to listen to your voice. Let your voice be your guide. If you feel tired, fatigued, heavy, uncomfortable, your throat starts to hurt, stop, right? You're done with your practice for the day. If you feel better the next day, go into that practice. So that advice trumps everything. But otherwise, you want to kind of persist through problem areas, because it's just too easy to quit. It's too easy to try something 3 or 4 times and be like, it's not working today. I'll try it tomorrow. Which can be a strategy, but the more you kind of push through it, the more you'll learn still. And you'll, once again, create more reference points, which can be very helpful. And then finally, the last piece of advice I have for today is we want to, at the end of our practice session, take time to kind of really document what we learned. We want to get some feedback. We want to sit back and say, what didn't work? What did it feel like? What did it sound like when things didn't work? What did work when I adjusted in certain ways? What did it feel like? What did it sound like? How effective was I at sticking with my plan? How focused was I? You know, and then the most important question you can always ask yourself is, what do I need to do to make my next practice session better? You know, what can I sit back and say that I learned from this practice session that I can take into tomorrow or the next practice session? So yeah, that about does it for today in our 7 practice tips for highly effective singers. I hope this has helped. Apply these tips to your practice sessions and I guarantee you'll get some really good results. If you're not a part of our group, you definitely want to join. Go to GrowingSingers.com and then just click the join button and we will let you in. And definitely, once again, be on the lookout for some really cool news later on this week. I don't know if we're going to do it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, somewhere in there, but it's going to be a really unique way for us to give you guys some feedback on your individual voice, something we've never done before, and yeah, we're really excited about it. So we'll be seeing you around in future videos.